Today, we're going to spit some game because pressure is a privilege and most people don't realize it. So, I'm here to explain exactly why that is the case. You see, most people think pressure is a bad thing. The reason why is because they're stressed, they don't know what they're supposed to do, they're freaking out, etc., etc. But in reality, all the pressure that you're feeling is actually a good thing. And the reason why is because it means that there's some sort of opportunity in the air, right? Because if you really think about it, what's actually the opposite of pressure? Well, most people would say it's just no pressure. Well, in my opinion, yeah, no pressure is the opposite of pressure, but what actually is no pressure? Well, if you think about it, it really just is stagnation, which means that you're really not going anywhere and you're just staying stuck in the same exact place. So if you want to do something and achieve something out of life, why would you stay the same? Why would you be in the same place? Why wouldn't you want to be able to go to where you want to go? Well, realize this, that if you want to go to somewhere else, you want to achieve your goals, whatever, that's going to come with pressure. So when you're faced with a difficult situation, when you're faced with pressure in your life, look at it as a privilege because it is a good thing. It means that there's opportunity in this space. If you're starting your own business, you're going to feel pressured. You're going to have to fulfill for clients. You're going to spend a bunch of money without knowing how to get it back. You're going to take a risk, etc., etc. These are all things that cause enormous amounts of pressure on yourself if you have people to provide for, etc., etc. But realize that most people aren't actually in this situation. Most people just stay the same exact way. They stay stuck in the same exact place. They don't really go anywhere. They don't really do anything. They're all just reactive instead of being proactive and actually doing things to get to where they want to go. So if you feel any sort of pressure in your life right now, look at that as a privilege and think of it as, okay, what opportunity is in this pressure that I can grasp right now to actually move the needle forward? So here's the thing, when you feel all this pressure, you realize there's an opportunity. And once you grasp that opportunity, you stop looking at pressure as a bad thing and you actually start chasing that pressure because you know that is actually what's going to get you closer to your goals. And for me, this was the key turning point in a big part of my journey because I constantly tried to avoid pressure. I was the guy that was super nervous when something was coming up. I was the guy that was kind of cracking under pressure all the time until I realized that living in that pressure is the most precious thing you can do. It really gets you closer to your goal. You're not ever going to get to your goal unless you actually face some sort of pressure in your life. And once you finally decide to actually live in that pressure, once you decide to be around pressure, and once you actually decide that pressure is what you want out of life, that's when you finally start achieving things. And if you constantly keep avoiding that, just like I did back in the day, that's when everything's going to change, right? Because if you want to change, you can't stay the same. It's how life works, believe it or not, but that is the way you have to view things. So once you finally get comfortable with pressure, that's when everything changes. That's when you actually start doing things. And that's when you realize that you really actually like the game. You love playing the game. You love doing what you're doing compared to others who just start like are kind of cracking up under that pressure. They don't really know what to do, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you start chasing that and you start being in those pressurized moments, you'll realize that it's actually not as bad as you think. And you'll also realize that it's going to get you closer to your goal. So you're going to enjoy pressure way more than what you're doing if you're trying to avoid it. So now that you actually know that pressure is a real privilege and it is something that you should start enjoying instead of avoiding, you might ask yourself, well, how do I actually get comfortable with being in pressure situations, right? And that's totally a fair question to ask. And it is something you have to ask yourself, and it is something you have to also learn with experience. But to give you a little bit of help just to make sure you're not overboiling or getting overloaded when you're actually in high tense situations, the number one thing when it comes to pressure is first of all realizing, like I said, that it is a good thing. and that it means that there's some sort of opportunity, right? You have room for growth because you're not going to grow unless you're under pressure. It's the same thing as being in the gym. If you're just starting out in the gym and you're benching, let's just say 20 kg, you're not going to get to 100 kg the first day, right? You're going to have to do 20, you're going to have to do 40, you're going to have to do 60, then you're going to have to do 80, and then 80 is super hard, and you'll realize that over time you'll gradually increase the weight because when you're benching 60 for the first time, it's super heavy. You're in a lot of pressure, your muscles are completely contracted, there's a bunch of pressure, but over time, after staying in the same amount of pressure, over time, like I said, they're actually going to increase, you can increase your weight, right? It's the same exact thing here. So whenever you're in a difficult situation, yeah, it might be super difficult the first time, but the second time and the third time and the fourth time, you'll realize that it's easier to handle this. You've been here before. It's way easier to deal with now. It's not actually as scary. You're not as nervous as you were the first time because you've learned to actually be in these situations. So the number one thing that I can actually give you when it comes to being in these situations is to also look for pressure situations. Like if you're super scared to socialize or talk to random people in person, then start actually talking to people, like go into difficult social situations, do shit that you're not used to doing, because you're going to get way more comfortable with it over time. And you might be asking like, holy shit, how do I actually do this just starting out? It's like, well, the best way to actually do it when you're starting out is to just fucking do it. Like you don't really have any other option, because the only way to really get more comfortable with pressure situations is to be in these situations, right? It sounds simple, but a lot of people just keep avoiding all the pressure. They keep avoiding everything. And you're probably one of them, like I was. I'll even tell you this, like, this is super personal from way back in the day. When I was like a kid and we were having school presentations, I was so fucking scared of having presentations that I was literally like shaking in my voice. I was so nervous. I was shaking. I couldn't talk. It was the most dreadful experience ever. Everybody was laughing at me. It was so fucking like, dude, I hated that shit. But after actually having more and more presentations, because you had to, we were just forced to have presentations. So after a while of actually having presentation after presentation after presentation, it just became easier. It just flowed way better. I wasn't as nervous, etc. And later down the line, presentations were actually the thing that I enjoyed the most with school instead of having written tests and everything, because I got so comfortable up there that I was literally always getting good grades when I had presentations compared to having written exams and tests and so on. So it was so scary to begin with, but after I started pushing into it, and actually enjoying the pressure situations, it ended up being the most enjoyable time that I had in school was having presentations, which is just crazy to look at when you actually see where it started off from, right? So it's so insane how the mind works, but it really just comes down to actually being in those situations, getting comfortable with them, and also going into them with the right mindset. If you're going into something being like, this is super high pressure, I'm gonna fuck up, I'm gonna mess up, this is not good, that's probably how it's going to go. But if you're somehow able to go into a situation that is pretty high tense, high pressure situation, before going into it, you just actually think to yourself, like, okay, there's a lot of pressure right now. However, pressure is a privilege, it's a good thing. I'm gonna go into this with the right mindset and just whatever happens, happens. At least I'm going to try to enjoy to be in this situation. It once you actually go into it with that type of mindset, you'll realize how much easier it actually is to be in a pressure situation rather than just staying stuck in the same place. Like you have to think about all of, just like think about people out there, all of these athletes fucking taking, let's just say soccer, right? They're just taking a penalty in the last minute of a World Cup. It's like so much pressure. The whole world is watching. Everything can go wrong. It's so much pressure, but people live in that moment and people break in that moment. And who do you want to be? If you watch basketball, like if you're in the NBA, let's just say there's a championship on the line, you're shooting a free throw, the score is tied. There's so much pressure on you in that situation. Are you going to crack, or are you going to be the one that actually succeeds? Well, that actually all comes down to how comfortable you are in that situation and what mindset you go into. Because if you go into that with a bad mindset, well, you better believe that you're probably going to end up going out of it even worse than how you anticipated. But if you go into it with the right mindset, you'll realize that most people aren't in this situation. You have a great opportunity here and make the best out of it. Hope that helped. I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.